my second video in this series. The first one, this is all about thyroid optimization. As I learned from functional doctors, we have to go through these 3 steps to optimize thyroid hormone. If we got the things that are destroying the thyroid tissue, we're never going to get there. It can cause a lot of disease states, and I talked about that in the first video. It's linked below. This one, my friends, is all about the disruptors. And some of these disruptors can actually tap in and destroy your thyroid tissue as well. So it's kind of an overlap between the two. And then once we do all of this, that's when you can finally optimize your thyroid hormone. As I spoke about in the first video, it's basically the most important hormone you want to optimize for. And it's got a butter zone. So we've got to get it in the butter zone, not too high, not too low. And once you get through all of these steps, it will be in the butter zone effortlessly. It will stay there and you'll feel pretty good. Now, today we're going to talk about everything that's going to disrupt it. And some of these things can cause tissue damage in the thyroid gland itself. And one of the biggest drivers is inflammation. When you've got inflammation, you've got insulin resistance. They kind of go around in a big loop. So insulin resistance here, very deleterious. So that's just hyperglycemia. So your blood sugar is a bit too high. And we'll talk about where it should be optimally, not what your doctor says, but there's an optimal range, and that's where we want to get it. So glucose, 2 pathways, increases reactive oxygen species, causes inflammation and cortisol to go up. Then it comes down to here, uncouples not enos there. So your nitric oxide, which your blood pressure, goes to shit. And then it will come down here to AGEs, and that will cause a lot of oxidative stress in and of itself. And we'll talk more about that. And I actually spoke a little bit about it in the first video. And you'll have dyslipidemia. So your cholesterol will be too high and your healthy HDL will be too low and your trigs will be skyrocketing. And it's causing a lot of inflammation, vascular remodeling, and that's not good. Plaque to build up, endothelial dysfunction. So you get erectile issues. You got a lot of, your blood flow doesn't go to your brain too well. So you get a lot of brain fog, apoptosis, cell death, and endoreticular stress, which isn't good for testosterone production at all. So this is the key. And I'll come back to this towards the end somewhere. And that's how we're going to optimize the thyroid hormone. I'll talk about that towards the end. A special mention again will go to inflammation. This is my good friend, Dr. J. Listen to this.
Thyroid, the TG gene is concerning. Only concerning if you have inflammation here, but a lot of people do have, excuse me, a lot of people do have inflammation.
Yep.
And that's a 10-fold higher risk of autoimmune thyroid issues.
10-fold, right? So what
well, so if he's sleeping, like inflammation usually is like lack of sleep, too much stress, like real obvious stuff, high blood sugar, heavy metals, testosterone off or whatever. So the basics are key, but it sounds like he's dialing in all that. The other thing about this gene is even if you're temporarily have inflammation, like say you've got just one day of stress, it'll shut your thyroid off for a couple of days, maybe,
Really? Okay. So you heard all that, like you've got blood sugar issues, that inflammation is going to drive a lot of those issues and it'll push your cortisol up. And when you have constant high cortisol, you have thyroid hormone resistance. So you can see how deleterious this is, and we'll come back to this. And just a special mention goes to psychological stress. It triggers inflammation. So when we're emotional in a negative way, that's not a good thing, my friends. So basically, we've got inflammation driving insulin resistance. It goes around in a big loop, stroke, heart arrhythmias. You've also got myocardial infarction, atherosclerosis, plaque building up the arteries, kidney disease, stomach cancer, colorectal, pancreatic, breast cancer. Don't panic. We can fix this. So right here, as you can see, altered thyroid hormone status causes testicular abnormalities. The system doesn't care about this because they only test, as I talked about in the first video. There's about 9 labs you need to get for thyroid hormone. There's more information to download a PDF about what those labs are. And they only test 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky. It's not a complete picture, and we have no clue how to optimize your thyroid hormone. And it causes insulin resistance, and here it pushes up your cholesterol. As like they learn about this in the 1920s, for God's sake. Why don't they optimize your thyroid hormone by doing the 9 labs they're supposed to do? It looks to me like they they don't care too much about you being too healthy. So in mammals, thyroid hormone depletion leads to decreased LDL receptors. So your LDL stays up high, so you have less expression, so you got elevated cholesterol. So why don't they fix your thyroid if your cholesterol is too high? No, they'd rather prescribe drugs because it's a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. So that's just something to think about there. And again, thyroid issues, dyslipidemia, thickening of the artery wall, blood pressure increases, and your heart doesn't work too splendidly. Now, insulin resistance is very easy to correct and reverse. The medical system say, no, it's not. You can't. You need these drugs because it's a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry, but you can fix it. Like right here, 2022, new research. They don't want you to know about this. This is behind a paywall. You got to pay to see this information. Trends in insulin resistance, insights into mechanisms and therapeutic strategies to fix this. So check this out. So when you got insulin resistance, and you don't have to be obese, you can be skinny fat and still have insulin resistance. So there's two problems. Problem number one here, but this is problem number two, which is cardiomyopathy, enlarged heart, atherosclerosis, plaque in the arteries, and high blood pressure for the heart. And then your fat cells leach inflammation. And we saw how deleterious inflammation, so it goes around and around in a circle. And then your muscles have lipotoxicity, which isn't good. And it's also got glucose intolerance, so you feel weaker, frail. And then your liver starts to play up, and the liver keeps estrogen healthy levels, and it detoxes chemicals and heavy metals. So we have to have a high functioning liver. And then your central nervous system, your brain, taps out Alzheimer's, cognitive decline, MS, things like that. A lot of cancers, chronic kidney disease, and if you're a lady, polycystic ovary syndrome. So certainly have to correct insulin resistance. If you want more information about that, drop a comment below, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction, or do another video on showing you how to walk this back. Now, again, inflammation ain't good for testosterone and everything that we've spoken of so far. Before I actually go there, I forgot to talk about this here. So if the medical system checks your fasting insulin, which is very rare, they won't check it until you're kind of obese and they think you've got type 2 diabetes, and they'll wait till it gets really high. Right, when you're over 24.9, when you hit 25, I'll say, well, you need these multi-billion-dollar-a-year drugs. Now, functional medicine says when we get it back to optimal, which is between 2 and 5, do you see the big difference there? It is huge. It is so big. You walk back all of these diseases, inflammation, lipotoxicity, Alzheimer's. So it's not difficult to get there. It can take time, certainly, but it's absolutely doable, and it's worth it because your health and longevity comes back. So inflammation, special mention goes to low testosterone here. And again, the labs are wrong because when they check your CRP, you can also do more labs than just CRP. They'll say if you're below 3, you're good, send you on your way. When functional medicine says we need to get it at least below 1, ideally 0.5. So let's say you're 1.3, and we see this quite a lot. You're nearly 3 times over in inflammation there. So you've got low-grade inflammation. They send you on your way. They don't care too much about it. Now, when you do have inflammation, your testosterone is low T concentrations, frailty, disability, cardiovascular events, and your muscles just waste away to nothing. You become very frail. And it also shuts down muscle growth. So you can't pack on a lot of muscle until you get your CRP to around about there. So listen to my good friend, Dr. J.
I mean, the problem with inflammation is it shuts off muscle growth. It basically tells your body you're in a stress state. So it's not a building state.
So as you can see there, it's going to shut you down. So we need to fix that issue too. And let's talk about AGEs. So I mentioned this in the first video there, and I'll talk about where they are and how to get them out of your body, but they're called advanced glycation end products. That's what they are. And they activate several inflammatory signaling pathways. Let's just uncover what these AGEs do. And scientists say this is causative. And when scientists say something is causative, my friends, that's a pretty big deal. So many degenerative diseases these AGEs cause, and ALEs for that matter, Alzheimer's, cognitive decline, memory loss, heart disease, diabetes, insulin resistance, chronic kidney disease, wrinkles. Who wants wrinkles? and loss of skin elasticity, infertility. So as you can see here, basically they glycate proteins, and the skin's full of proteins, and they're glycating them, causing all of this, a lot of people, unfortunately, they use lotions and potions. Now, I've actually been paying a lot of attention to this for the last 4 years, especially, and I've actually walked back some wrinkles, and I'm 53 in 2 months. And, apart from the grey beard, I don't look too old, I think. But anyway, so right here, you're going to, when these AGEs attacking your skin, you're going to start to have that drooping, the crow's nest there, the dark colorations, and the skin blemishes. And this crease is very prominent, and your jowls kind of hang down. So that's not helpful at all. And I'll show you where they are in a moment. And they all drive into glucose, blood sugar, and insulin resistance. And guess what? Big food, big problem, because it's in the food supply. So all of this right here, cancer, arthritis, diabetes, atherosclerosis, Alzheimer's, we know this. There's many more deleterious things that happens. And also fertility in both men and women. And of course, poor pregnancy outcomes, the embryo, and a lot of gestational diabetes as well. So let's check it out. So when our blood sugar is too high too long, we form these AGEs, but also ALEs, advanced lipoxidation end products. And as the studies have shown, like many of these studies, my friends, there is ample evidence that these AGEs play an important role in skin aging. So you're happening to go over there very fast. And you can actually test for this. To test for glycation, one test you can do is hemoglobin A1C, and optimal is between 4 and 5. That's where you want it. Suboptimal is this way, so 5.7 and over. So you can actually test for this. And they're also in our food supply. And what also glycates proteins is when you got too much ferritin, you do that in the blood lab. And I've got a PDF that you can download to check out where the optimal ranges are for blood labs and what to get them in, and also all of the correct ones. Like, as I mentioned, you need at least 9 for thyroid hormone in the system. Test 1, maybe 2. Nowhere near enough data. So not helpful at all. And what I'm going to do now is just show you how to start walking back this dysglycemia, insulin resistance. And this is my good friend, Dr. J. So he did a 5-year PhD on sex hormones, but also cholesterol, did Alzheimer's research, and he did a lot of research on the deleterious effects of elevations in blood sugar. Now, the system will tell you about 100 is okay when you really want it at about 85 or 87 and below. Because as you can see right here, fasting blood glucose, a 22-year follow-up of non-diabetic men. So basically, if your fasting blood glucose is over 85, that's 4.7 here in Australia, you've got a significant higher mortality rate from cardiovascular disease. So it's absolutely key that we fix this problem, because it's going to eventually drive insulin resistance. And all these AGEs that are forming, and you're going to age faster and have all of these degenerative diseases, and we've already talked about them. So listen to my good friend, Dr. J, just talk about the glycation and also the blood sugar issue.
If sugar stays in your body a long time, it's called advanced glycation end products, right? AGE. Glycation, it's basically glucose, right? It's sugar.
Glucose. Yeah.
And it sticks to your proteins like hemoglobin A1C, and it sticks to all kinds of stuff all over your body. It makes your cells all screwed up, and the proteins sticking out of your cells get all screwed up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to measure. So the nice thing about oxidized LDL, it's easy to measure in a blood test. The problem with age, it's hard to measure because it's all stuck to everything inside your body. It's not just sitting around in your blood. Right? Yeah. Keep that blood sugar below 85. You'll be fine.
Yeah. So that's what we need to do, because glucose, as they do in cholesterol tests, as you can see right here, they use glucose to induce oxidative stress. So that's when glucose is above that 85, or for us Aussies or people in the UK there,
4.7.
It's 4.7. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we have to really understand, is just to keep that blood sugar below that thick level. And the mainstream doctors say that 100 is okay, when it's really not, is it?
No, it's insane. It's completely insane. What they do in the medical system with sugar is they wait until you get full-blown diabetes before they like to complain about it, because that's when they can start selling drugs. It always goes back to the drug sales and how they're trying to manipulate things for that. But you don't want to wait until you get diabetes to pay attention to your blood sugar. You want to be optimized, right? That's the whole goal.
So as you can see there, need to test your blood glucose, and you can get a glucometer or a CGM. If you want more information on that, drop a comment below. I'm more than happy to help you with that. So when scientists test out oxidized cholesterol, and oxidizer cholesterol, and that's the bad stuff when it's oxidized, they use glucose to induce oxidative stress, because when glucose is too high too long, it glycates proteins, AGEs, and it's very oxidative. If you recall the first slide here, you can see here, all this dysglycemia, glucose is oxidizing 1, 2, it's uncoupling nitric oxide, so you got hypertension, number 3. Number 4, you're creating these AGEs. And number 5, you got dyslipidemia, so you've got too high cholesterol, and your trigs are up too high, and your HDL, the healthy cholesterol, is down a bit too low. And right here as well, this book is a fantastic book to pick up from Dr. James DiNicolantonio called The Blood Sugar Fix. And this is going to really show you how to fix the blood sugar issue. So pick up that book. It's linked below. But inside that book, he talked about a study adapted from O'Keefe et al., 2008, and many more studies, my friends, have been replicated like this. So this is the test, right? You see this graph? This is a 2-hour postprandial glucose load. So after 2 hours, if your blood sugar comes down below 87, it's a coronary regression in plaque in your arteries. Right? Isn't that amazing? And once it's above that, and remember the system says the 100's okay, and I've even seen 110, okay? You know, you're filling up the plaque in your arteries here, right? So you can see how the system is profiting from people, because it's going to drive all of these metabolic issues right here. You'll eventually get insulin resistance, and that's going to start to show up. Then they're going to prescribe you the big pharma drugs. It's their business model. So let's get healthy. Let's pay attention. Let's fix this problem. And another issue that can happen too when you've got elevations in blood glucose. So in humans, when your glucose is too high, it inhibits growth hormone release. Growth hormone. And the same is true as when your insulin is high. So it's a double whammy. And as I learned from this legend here, Matthew Walker, sleep scientist, in his book, Why We Sleep, without growth hormone replenishing the lining of the blood vessels called the endothelium. So this is the protective lining of your blood vessels, the endothelium. They're shorn and stripped of their integrity. Vessels rupture, heart attack and stroke, most common, and they blame cholesterol. But you can see what's going on there. The glucose is oxidizing the cholesterol, and they also blame things like red meat. Is it really that? Do you think that's what it is? Drop a comment below, let me know. And then, you know, when your insulin is too high and your glucose is too high and you got inflammation, your estrogen's too high, low testosterone, my friends. And the beautiful thing is when you fix this problem and you get your thyroid optimized, your brain's gonadotropin releasing hormone system releases pulses every 2 hours. Sit with that for a moment. Every 2 hours, your brain's releasing pulses of FSH and LH. FSH, spermagenesis, LH, testosterone production. So we should have a sack full of testosterone, but we don't. It's because of things like this. We're not paying attention to this at all. And we're not, not only that, we're aging faster and we feel terrible. And we want to age much better. Like, I think this is just so huge. So let's have a look at the problem with AGEs in big food. So there's ample evidence now that our food supply amplifies the systemic inflammation. So we're eating foods that already have these AGEs in it. So that's problem one. But they've also got lip oxidization end products too. So it's a double whammy. And all of this starts to show up. So these big food, big problem, my friends. And when you get your as I mentioned, when you get your inflammatory markers checked, and this is just one of them, they'll say 3 and below is okay when it's really not. Ideally, we want to get it 0.5 and below, but under 1 is okay. So we really need to pay attention to this. So these AGEs cause 50 times more free radicals, and this is going to cause a lot of problems downstairs in the bedroom. I'll play this video for you. This is from Dr. Amy B. Keelan, board certified MD. So listen carefully to this, my friends.
These smooth muscle cells begin to die. This is called apoptosis. Apoptosis happens for a number of reasons, but once you lose about 15% of the cells within here, all of a sudden you lose the ability to expand completely. You can still expand and you can still have an erection, but it's not a full erection. And so when that happens, you've got your tunica, but those veins are staying open. So the blood comes in, but the blood then goes right back out of these open veins because you haven't expanded fully and you don't have a full erection. Does that make sense? So this is called venous leak, CVOD, but it's not a vein problem. It's actually a problem with the cells inside the corpora cavernosa. These cells, these smooth muscle cells, are the problem. Now, what causes these cells to die? Oxidative stress of some sort. So things that cause inflammation and oxidative stress can increase the death of these cells. So that could be just age, but it also could be poor lifestyle choices. It could be diabetes or high blood pressure. It could be a high sugar diet. It could be not exercising. Also, low testosterone over time could do that.
So everything's driving that, like the dysglycemia, the AGEs, lowering testosterone. So it's a double whammy. You've got these AGEs cause 50 times more free radicals, asthma, pulmonary disorders, arthritis, atherosclerosis, heart disease, and they shorten your telomeres. So I've done another video all about the AGEs and their deleterious effects, and it should be linked below. If it's not, just drop a comment and I'll link it to it below to fix that problem as well. And unfortunately, food processing puts a lot of chemicals, preservatives and shit in it, and the way that they process foods forms these AGEs. So we're getting a healthy dose of these chemicals, not only with AGEs, but the chemicals themselves. And they've shown that fast food, especially the way they package it in boxes, the chemicals from these boxes leach into the food, and up to 58% higher from fast food than processed foods right there. So the way you want to think about it, my friends, is your AGE load over a lifetime. What has it been so far? You've been eating a lot of these foods. Has your blood sugar been too high? Well, you've had a massive increase from the foods that you've been eating. And if your blood sugar's been too high, you've just got accelerated aging. And this is what shows up, and we feel terrible. We're aging fast. We feel like we're losing our prime. But as I've mentioned there, I've done a video all about reversing aging. So if it's not linked below, drop a comment and I'll show you where to find that video, because this is something that you can do. You can walk back through epigenetic gene modifications, biological aging, which I think is really helpful to do. And that's what I've been doing over the last 6 years, but more importantly, over the last 4 years, working with these experts. So that's enough about the blood sugar and AGEs, but just a special mention goes to these chemicals. Thyroid disrupting, these chemicals, but they're also estrogenic and anti-androgenic, which means they crush testosterone and testosterone receptors. And they're cytotoxic, genotoxic, reproductive toxicity, neurotoxicity. That's a hell of a lot of toxicity. If that wasn't enough, check this out. I learned this from Shanna Sean, PhD. So grab this book, Countdown. I should have a link below. But anyway, these chemicals, a lot of them are anti-androgenic. And if you know someone's pregnant, or maybe you're thinking about having a kid, listen carefully to this, because these chemicals are able to disrupt androgen action in fetal life right here with irreversible demasculinizing consequences. So think about the generations that are coming out now. They're very confused. And one example that she put in her book here, Tylenol, anti-androgenic testosterone lowering effects. Now listen carefully. Developmentally speaking, the default brain is female, which means if the expectant mother is exposed to these anti-androgenic chemicals during a pregnancy, The male baby is likely to have slightly less male typical brain and male typical behavior. And I think that's what we're seeing. So enough about that. So these chemicals and pesticides and pollutants are really toxic for your thyroid, heavy metals. There's lots of foods that can also disrupt it and all this shit here. And we'll talk about that towards the end. The way you want to think about these chemicals is they're fucking everywhere. And in the PDF I've got linked below, I show you how to detox them. They're in personal care products. The whole point is you've got a big daily load of these chemicals, and it's just completely crushing all of our hormones, causing a lot of cytotoxicity, really deleterious. So if you do things right, you'll still get a bit of a load, but you can take care of that. It's no problem whatsoever. So you make sure you get rid of those chemicals. Let's talk about the gut, because as I mentioned in the first video there, the gut is the foundation for health. So we have to get it back to health. And I'm going to talk about how to do that right here today. So the gut-brain axis, stress, anxiety, depression, IBS, schizophrenia, cognitive decline, autism. So I've spoken about this, disrupting your hormones, the heart, the lungs, the liver, pancreas, diabetes, the bones, osteoporosis, muscle. Right? You're trying to put on muscle in the gym, your gut's sick and you're struggling and you think you're doing everything right, but your gut could be sick. And to make matters worse, if you put it off, sarcopenia, and you get frail as you age. And the skin axis, right? Exactly what we're speaking to here. Acne, cirrhosis, atopic dermatitis, alopecia, hair loss, wrinkles and aging, and the reproductive axis, testes for men, ovaries for the ladies, kidneys and bladder. Got to have a healthy gut. So let's stop destroying our gut first and foremost. So in a lot of the foods that we're eating, they've got preservatives, which by default kill bacteria, preservatives. So they go into our gut and kill the good bacteria in our gut. And they've also got emulsifiers in the gut. So here's a video from Human just speaking about how bad these emulsifiers are for the gut. Check it out.
Foods. You're bringing those emulsifiers into your gut, and those emulsifiers strip away the mucosal lining of the gut, and they actually cause the neurons that innervate the gut, that extend those little processes we call axons into the gut, to retract deeper into the gut. And as a consequence, you're ingesting a bunch of food, and the signals like CCK never get deployed. The signals that actually shut down hunger are never actually triggered. And so as a consequence, you want to eat far more of these highly processed foods. In addition, if you then go from eating a highly processed food to non-highly processed foods, you're not able to measure the amounts of amino acids, sugars, and fatty acids in those foods as accurately. You've actually done structural damage at a micro level, but structural level damage, to the mucosal lining of the gut. Now, this can all be repaired if you stay away from highly processed foods for some period of time, but the negative effects of these emulsifiers are quite real. So to make it really clean and simple, emulsifiers from highly processed foods are limiting your gut's ability to detect what's in the foods you eat, and therefore to deploy the satiety signals, the signals that shut down hunger. In addition to that, there's a parallel mechanism at play that I talked about in a previous episode, but I'll remind you again that you have neurons in your gut that are sensing sugar and are sending a subconscious signal up to the brain via the vagus nerve. And those neurons trigger the release of dopamine, which makes you crave more of that food. So now you've got parallel signals making you want to eat more sugar, making you unaware of how much sugar you've eaten, and that are disrupting the inputs to the nervous system that signal to the rest of your brain and body that you've obtained enough fatty acids and you've obtained enough amino acids. So these highly processed foods are really terrible.
So they got a whole bunch of emulsifiers. It's a structural damage to your gut. It's destroying the microbiome in your gut, and you're hungry all the time. Can you see what's going on there? Big Food have designed it to do this, and it causes a lot of inflammation too. So here's something that's pretty shocking, right? This is all like when you look at the packaging and of all your foods. You know, like these nuggets here or chips, they should only have a few ingredients, but look what they've got there. It's all designed for profit. And I was on a group call with my friend, Dr. J, just speaking about how bad these processed foods are. So I'll play the video and just listen carefully because it's pretty impactful.
There is in this topic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at these chips from KFC, I mean, it should be 3 ingredients: the chips, the oil they cook them in, and salt, right? But they're packed full of soy. And I guess that would be because they're highly addictive soy proteins. Walk us through that.
Exactly. Yeah, so exactly. I was going to mention this, that there's only a few plants that act on your opioid receptor. And gluten is one of them. Dairy is one of them, casein and dairy. And then soy is one of them. Those are the big hitters. And so they're addictive. So food companies put those 3 things. They put dairy proteins, they put gluten proteins, and then they put soy proteins in food products, literally just to make them more addictive. And sometimes they don't even put them on the label. You're lucky if the fact that it's actually on the label. And of course, people aren't reading the label when they're going to a fast food restaurant like KFC. They're just getting whatever, and they're not even looking at the ingredients.
Yeah.
But even sometimes they're legally allowed, companies are legally allowed to put natural ingredients or natural flavors on labels. So you don't even necessarily know if they're sneaking some of these opioid receptor binding, these heroin-like molecules, right?
Yeah.
Heroin mimicking molecules, these addictive molecules into your food.
Yeah.
So basically, your gut can't signal satiety. You got dopamine that's going off the chain. So there's 2 forms of addiction there. And then they select for these opioid heroin-like peptides to make it even worse. And it's destroying your gut. So when your gut's destroyed, we're left with all of this. And the biggest impact is on your brain because you feel like shit, you just feel like garbage. And people say, oh, this is normal. As you age, this is just what happens. And then you get into a situation where you need big pharma drugs. And just to explain that, this is Dr. Daddis, and he's a leading clinician, functional clinician that speaks to all of these topics. And I'll just play this video just to show you exactly what I mean about these big pharma drugs.
So inflammation in the gut activates gut immune cells. Those gut immune cells send messenger proteins to cells in the brain called neuroglia. Those neuroglia get activated, and then the brain gets inflamed. And when the brain gets inflamed, nerve conduction, synapses slow down. Inflammation in the brain slows down synapses, and patients just can't think, they can't focus, they can't get their thought process going on. So those are the things that happen with it. So basically, some people that have immune reactions to gluten, they get severe brain inflammation when they eat it. They can even have the blood-brain barrier, gut barrier breakdown. They can set up the stage for neurological autoimmunity. They can decrease blood flow to their brain. As their brain gets inflamed, their messenger synaptic pathways become slower, and they just don't function well. And they walk in the healthcare system and they get diagnosed with chronic depressive disorder or chronic anxiety disorder.
So you get misdiagnosed because you've got a sick gut because you're eating these foods, and you're more likely to continue to eat these foods. And as I mentioned, and just, to really emphasize it, it's doing all this to us, and we just feel like we're getting old. We feel worthless as a man or a woman. And, you can just see what's going on there. And I think it's just a smart idea to know this information because it makes you just not want to use big food because it's all for profit. And then that leads you down the very slippery path to big pharma drugs. And as I learned from Dr. Ken Berry, they lower testosterone. Check this out.
All those things are symptoms of low testosterone. And there's a long list of prescription medications that you might be taking from your doctor, your doctor that you trust, that could actually be plummeting your testosterone levels. I've got a YouTube video.
So by very definition, they lower testosterone. That's because they use in pharmaceuticals petrochemicals. Petrochemicals are estrogen-like. And to make matters worse, the drugs they use, they put emulsifiers in them like polysorbate 80. And polysorbate 80 has been now shown to destroy your gut and cause systemic inflammation, polysorbate 80. But you've also got all of these ones they use as well. And this is what Dr. J said to me a couple of years ago, and I'll never forget it. Listen.
It's not thriving. It's definitely suboptimal. It's frustrating, honestly. I mean, especially on the topic of testosterone, because if your testosterone goes down, just your health in general goes down. So that opens the door to a bunch of prescription drugs.
Yeah.
And so the pharma companies are very excited about keeping your testosterone down from a financial perspective.
Exactly.
As a business model, it's a good idea for them.
Because the pharmaceutical industry, like their diabetes drugs, their statin drugs, their hypertension, their anxiety, their depression drugs, multi-$100 billion a year industry. So as you can see, they're a pretty big problem. And it all stems from destroying your gut, and that's what the big food does. They come along with the medications, which further destroy the gut, keep your testosterone down, you feel suboptimal. And as a consequence, you feel like a lazy loser. You're aging faster, and you just feel like, oh, geez, man, I'm never going to get there. So that's my experience, and the functional doctors that I work with, it's their experience as well. Now, the final thing that we'll talk about here today is nutrient lack, and then I'm going to bring it all together. So this is from the NHANES database, and I'll talk about this in a moment. I'll also give you a bit of an example of what I'm doing nutrition-wise. But in a nutshell, one thing that you really want to pay attention to, and I've spoken about this on YouTube several times, and if you want to know a video where I speak about homocysteine in particular, drop a comment below and I'll link you to it. Because homocysteine, we've done hundreds and hundreds of tests now with people that we help, and very rarely we will see homocysteine in the optimal level. Now, homocysteine will cause plaque to build up like the old glucose there, but it also causes lesions in your arteries. And homocysteine risk, cardiovascular, heart attack and stroke, atherosclerosis, nervous system, epilepsy, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, sensory, so your vision and your hearing kind of goes, reproductive, endocrine, right, hormonal disruption, your skeleton and muscle systems, and your kidneys tap out. So we really want to make sure we've got optimal vitamin and mineral status, and I'll show you how to do that. But what I like to show you is how complex the metabolism is, but you don't need to know any of this. But if you don't want to have high homocysteine, I'll talk about what levels homocysteine should be at. You've got to make sure that this pathway here doesn't slow down, right? But if you're lacking magnesium or potassium, it bottlenecks there and homocysteine goes up. But to really emphasize this, you need a whole bunch of vitamins and minerals like zinc, B3, B6, serine, heme, iron. Over here, you need zinc, methyl. This is the whole MTHF gene there. You need SAMe, B2, NADPH. So you can see you need lots of vitamins and minerals to keep all these pathways going. And what is really amazing to me is the potassium there. 97.6% of people are suboptimal with potassium. And as I mentioned there, right, where is it? Right here, potassium, it will slow this pathway down and homocysteine builds up. And as I said, we've done hundreds and hundreds of people, and very rarely will they have homocysteine in the optimal range. Now, if your physician even checks for homocysteine, they very rarely do, they'll say 14.5 and below is okay. That's not where you want it. You want to get it about 8 and below. So that's the green zone. That's safe. Now, if it's 14.5 and below, that's not optimal. You've got a medium load. And if it's higher than that, like this is a pretty typical lab we see back 17.8 when we first start working with new people, that's where the homocysteine is. And as you can see there with homocysteine, it's not helpful. So that's why we've got to make sure we've got optimal vitamin and mineral status. So a couple of special mentions goes to retinol, vitamin A, 51% deficient, vitamin D, 95, vitamin E, like 93, vitamin K, 71. And also magnesium, just about 61% of people are deficient. So we've really got to make sure we've got optimal vitamin and mineral status, because old vitamin D is required to make sex hormones, and the same is true for retinol here, vitamin A. And it also makes another androgen called DHEA, which is a neural steroid, and it's kind of classified as a fountain of youth steroid. So do you want to sleep? Well, look at the vitamins and minerals you need for serotonin and a happy brain and melatonin to sleep. And it's a vitamin D dependent pathway. So you need optimal vitamin D to have optimal serotonin and optimal melatonin. So to make serotonin, we've got to have folate, calcium, magnesium, B3, vitamin C. Down here, more again. And then when it gets to serotonin, it's further converted into melatonin there. And this is where the whole methylation thing comes in. This SAMe is created in methylation. So I know that kind of sounds confusing, but the whole point I'm trying to put forth is we need optimal vitamin mineral status to keep everything in your body working 24/7. So vitamin K is really, really important, especially for testosterone production. And about 71% of the population are deficient in vitamin K2. Now, vitamin K has vitamin K1 and vitamin K2. Now, vitamin K2 has many different isoforms, and one very important isoform is what's called MK4. So I'll come back to this slide in a moment. But I learned this information from Dr. Chris Masterjohn. He's got a PhD in PhD in nutritional science. So vitamin K2, the isoform MK4, is needed to make sex hormones and prevent cancer. But all of these things here, so it boosts exercise performance, sexual health, metabolic health, bone and dental health, heart health, and cancer prevention. And how it helps with testosterone production is LH, which is the precursor for testosterone, comes inside the cell there. And nitric oxide, when you've got optimal nitric oxide, it comes down on these two protein kinases here. And these two protein kinases are MK4 dependent. So if you don't have enough vitamin K2 to make MK form, the isoform to keep testosterone flowing and energy flowing, everything slows to a crawl. So we need optimal vitamin and mineral status. Now, another thing that's important to understand is that big ag is another big problem because they started spraying the soil with synthetic fertilizers and it depleted the soil of key vitamins and minerals like copper, 76%, calcium. You can see the problem there. This was in 1940 and this was just in 1991. And Dr. J said that this dude here he tests the soil. And he's found through all of his testing that we need to eat approximately 2 times more meat, 3 times more fruit, and 4 to 5 times more vegetables than our grandfathers and grandmothers did back in the 1940s. So you can see how that is a big problem. So you know what really grinds my gears, my friends? The system tells us to eat all of these foods here, lots of these foods here, and their overall nutrient density is low. Why do you think, drop a comment below, why do you think they're telling us to eat nutrient poor food? The very first time I spoke to my good friend, Dr. Ken Berry, this is what he said to me, and I'll never forget it. Listen carefully.
The untrue story that eating a slave diet is the healthiest diet for a human being. Eating a plant-based diet, that's exactly the diet that the Roman emperors fed their subjects to keep them from revolting. That they had a full belly, they didn't starve to death, but they had no motivation. They had no mental inquisitiveness or ingenuity, and so they were easy to keep down.
Yeah, because they didn't have a lot of energy, and now to add insult to injury, it's packed full of chemicals, AGEs, things that destroy our gut, and our gut also takes a hit. And they tell us not to eat these foods, and their overall density is very high. And check out these foods here. Do you see these foods here? They're telling us not to eat those. So big problem. So how do you solve this problem? Well, it's pretty simple. All you need to do is get an app, the one that we train the people that we help to fix this problem. You only need to use it for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then you'll understand where you've got nutrient lack. The one that we use is called Chronometer. So basically, you're logging your foods, and it tracks vitamins and minerals and electrolytes. So you can see at the end of the day, like my vitamins are only 60% there, and they show you exactly which ones. The minerals, the electrolytes, the immune support, antioxidant support, bone health, and metabolism support. So it's showing you where all the voids are, and you can actually see where you're lacking, like B1 there. So all you got to do is just track your foods to solve this problem, to find out where your vitamins and minerals are lacking. So let's bring this home now. So these are all the things that affect the thyroid. So basically the first video, which causes tissue destruction, this video, which is all about AGEs and blood glucose issues as well. So as you can see here, the thyroid gland itself needs lots of vitamins and minerals like iron, iodine, tyrosine, zinc, selenium, vitamin E, all the B vitamins, C and D, vitamin A, zinc again, and selenium. So it needs lots of vitamins and minerals. Otherwise, you've got no hope in hell of optimizing your thyroid hormone. But what takes it out? That's metabolic stress or mental stress, trauma, a low-calorie diet. So if you're not eating enough food, your thyroid comes down, suboptimal. Inflammation, toxins, infections, kidney and liver dysfunction, medications, stress, radiation, fluoride, toxins, pesticides, the chemicals we're talking about there, the heavy metals, and also food sensitivities. And I've done a whole video all about food sensitivities. And the problem is that when you've got inflammation, whether that's from metabolic stress like the AGEs and dysglycemia, psychological stress also triggers inflammation as well. And when you have inflammation, the thyroid just crashes. You'll never be optimal. So you've got to have a good mindset, but you've got to get the metabolic stress out of your body, the chemical stress. And when you have too much stress in your body, you'll have thyroid resistance due to elevations in cortisol. And how do you know you got cortisol? Well, you feel like shit because cortisol fosters negative emotions, okay? So that's how you'll be able to tell there. Now, the way that you can absolutely fix this is what we call the functional method. So what you want to do with the functional method is look at your exposome. That's your history, all your history in the past there, and your current blood labs. And I've got a PDF you can download to show you what labs to get and what is optimal range. And then you can also look at your genome, and I've done another video about this, and it should be linked below. Now, your genome is going to show you what foods you're genetically sensitive to, so you can take them off the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table, so they don't cause stress and inflammation in your body. Then you can also test the microbiome to see where your gut is. Then you can also test inappropriate food sensitivities due to a leaky gut, which you can correct for. So that's going to give you a clear path back to health. So if you find like this is really complicated and you just want somebody to help you with this, there's information below to book a call with me, and I can walk you through exactly how to do this and how to finally get you back to a place where you feel optimal. So there's no guesswork. It's just clear, concise steps back to health and optimal thyroid testosterone production. So that's this video, my friends. So we've covered the first video, thyroid destroyers. I mean, we talked all about those on that video. And then the disruptors there, you can see what to do. If you've got any questions, drop a comment below. And the third and final video will be all about optimization, but you can't optimize your thyroid until you fix problem 1 and problem 2. So if you haven't watched video number 1, do that. And that's going to show you everything that I mentioned there about the DNA testing and the inappropriate food sensitivities and a little bit about gut health. So that video has been covered. Hopefully you've watched that video, you understand exactly what I'm talking about there. And the disruptors I've covered today. And on the next video, in a couple of days, more than likely, I'll release this video about thyroid optimization. So if you like these videos, legends, drop a comment below, like and share, subscribe if you'd like to hear me talk more about these topics. And if you've got any other topic you'd like me to cover, drop a comment below. I'm more than happy to do a video all about that. So that's it.